Okay, so we're recording now. Good evening and namaste, everyone. This is Atul, and this is a short presentation giving the philosophical perspective on Ayurveda and disease. So this is connecting together some of the philosophical parts of Ayurveda, specifically the Sankhya philosophy, and Ayurveda's philosophical approach. What do we see as the nature of disease according to Ayurveda? So this is just meant to give you some perspectives on that. So some of the things that we want to do, we want to compare Ayurveda and Western medicine. You know, what does Ayurveda say versus what does Western medicine say? We'll talk about the concept of karma. This is a concept that is part of one of the Shadarshan philosophies from ancient India called Karma Mimamsa. We will talk about the concept of kshetra. What does it mean when we say kshetra, or the field of activities? It's really a philosophical concept for, you know, where do we perform the actions that form the results of what we receive. What are the threefold miseries? What do we mean? We talk about the kleshas. So you can say adhyatmika klesh, there are the adhyatmika klesh, adhidaivika klesh, and adhibhautika klesh. We will talk about what those are, what they mean. We'll talk about the concept of krimi. Krimi meaning parasites or things which are invaders to the body, which also includes bacteria and some viruses. And there's some interesting distinctions there. And we'll talk finally about Ayurvedic chikitsa. What type of treatments do we have in Ayurveda? How do they compare that the treatments offered by Western medicine? So let's start with, what is the basic concept? What is it that Ayurveda aims to balance? Ayurveda aims to balance the physical body, the mind, the consciousness, the soul, karma. It takes into account what are our beliefs, our values, our diet, our lifestyle, our likes and dislikes. These are not advocating any particular one of these because we're not judgmental. We're just looking at the individual. These are all things that make up who we are as individuals, and they have an effect. If someone, for example, has a very angry or a very judgmental outlook on life, that is going to also contribute to their health in a negative way. Similarly, if someone has a very positive outlook, this will contribute in a positive way. But there's a whole realm of different things and different gunas that we can have in our speech, in our behavior, that can have a very profound effect on our own health. Ayurveda also asks the question, who am I treating? Western medicine does not. It does not, you know, look at the who am I treating? Who is it? Is it the soul or the mind or the body? It says, look, we don't know about any of these things. We're going to look at the disease. We're focused on the disease. There's something that's not working right, and we're going to deal with that, and we're going to fix it. We're not going to talk about anything philosophical like who am I? Ayurveda is focused on the whole person. So it is holistic in the most complete sense of the word. We are focused on the whole person and really our whole realm of existence. It should all be balanced. That's the goal of Ayurveda. Ayurveda is non-invasive, with very few exceptions. Their Ayurvedic treatments are non-invasive. Usually the most common thing that we do is we'll try to adjust someone's diet. We will try to get someone to eat differently, to use different spices, to have different foods, things that help them to be in balance. It is very non-invasive because these are things that you might do anyway. We also take into account preventative measures and pre-symptoms. These are all things that we take into account in Ayurvedic treatment. Now, Conventional medicine, or we sometimes just say Western medicine, you know, it's what doctors do, MDs. It treats the physical body. It may treat the mind. You know, recently it was, well, I say recently, it was maybe 10 years ago, drug companies managed to get rules changed so that general practitioners could prescribe antidepressants, which was a way for drug companies to sell a whole lot more. And the fact is that in America especially, the incidence of depression and anxiety disorder is really epidemic. It's estimated that there's some, I don't know, what, 80, 90 million people who suffer from depression and anxiety disorder. It's a massive number. It's a very stressed time that we live in. People are very stressed out. So it has become more of a point of awareness, but the treatment is usually going to be invasive. And, you know, here, take some drugs. It's going to alter your brain chemistry. So once you start taking it, you have to not stop taking it. Western medicine focuses on what disease am I treating? What is the specific thing? And this is why training for doctors is so rigorous, because you have to know the exact thing. If you do not make the correct, precise diagnosis, you can potentially put the patient's life in jeopardy. It's focused on bacteria, virus, cells, you know, the chemistry. It's everything is all about the you know, the chemistry and the mechanics of the body. Once the disease is discovered, and for emergencies, treatments are excellent. You know, there are things that people would routinely die from that are very treatable with conventional medicine. It's not something that we criticize and complain about. It just has the shortcoming of it's not really that focused on balancing and on treating the whole person. Nowadays, there are MDs. You know, some of our graduates of our program have been MDs. Even one who is a practicing neurosurgeon, and there are many doctors who are incorporating some elements of holistic treatment. Of course, they have to do it all very carefully because state licensing boards are just so rigidly conventional and intolerant of anything that's integrative. So it has to be done very carefully. But you know, this is what we're trying to do in Ayurveda. When we're not criticizing conventional medicine, we're just pointing out the contrast. It's a different approach. So, what is the living being that we're treating? So Ayurveda recognizes that there is a living being which exists on multiple levels. There are multiple dimensions. So starting from the outermost layer, there's the physical body, the stula sharira. That's the gross body. That's the thing, if I, you know, clap my hands together, I feel my hands. If I touch you, you feel my touch with my hand, right? That's the physical body. Then there's the energetic body, the sukshma sharira. What do we mean by the energetic body? This is the body. Think about, you know, like the physical body is like an overcoat, and the energetic body is like our, you know, our undergarments. It's fitting very closely, and they're conforming in shape. And the energetic body is made of mind, intelligence, and ahankar, or ego. And these things are all wrapped around the soul. So this concept of soul, or atma, is that there's a little tiny spiritual spark of spiritual energy, which is non-material, which has no mass. It's not something that you can measure or you can view on an oscilloscope or an electron microscope or any of these instruments that are used. It's something that's non-material, but it is, according to Ayurveda, this is the essential life. It is the living being that resides within the energetic body and the physical body. And the energetic body carries the Atma with it when, at the time of death, when the Atma or the soul leaves the body, it is carried by the energetic body to its next body. And then the energetic body adapts itself in form to its new physical body. So what's the concept of kshetra? Now, kshetra is a Sanskrit word. It means the field, literally. So according to Bhagavad Gita, which is a very important text on yoga philosophy, the kshetra is defined as the 5 great elements, or the Panchamahabhutas, the ego or ahankar, intelligence, prakriti or nature, the 11 senses. When we say 11 senses, we are talking about 5 knowledge acquiring senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, and 5 working senses: the ability to move, the ability to grasp and do work, the ability to speak, the ability to evacuate, and the ability to procreate. Plus the mind. The mind is considered to be the center of all the senses. Okay. Why is the mind considered to be center of the senses? Can anyone tell me? You can just put it in chat. Why do you think the mind is the center of senses? Can you tell me one reason why that might be? Just, right off the top of your head. So think about the senses, right? Your 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 5 working senses. Well, yeah, that's right. It does take in all information. It takes in all information. Now, let me ask another question to put a finer point on it. So yes, this is very correct. So the mind is the center of the senses because all of the input from the senses is going into the mind. Now, according to medical science, and we don't at all dispute this, when you see something, where does the seeing take place? Does it take place in your eyes? Where does it actually take place according to medical science? Where does vision take place? Exactly. It takes place in the brain. And in fact, the image is actually flipped over, just like it would be from a camera lens. And that's why you can have optical illusions, because all you have to do is trick your brain into seeing something that it thinks should be there. Our brains do an amazing amount of processing. I was trying to convince my son that, okay, look, you need to get glasses. And he was saying, no, I can see just fine. And I was explaining, look, when your optical resolution isn't that great, your brain is actually working harder and you get headaches. And so the mind, of course, we are not saying that the mind is simply the brain. The brain is part of where consciousness resides. There's an element of consciousness which is subtle. So we say that the mind is the 11th sense, or the mind is the center of the senses. For one, because all of that information from the senses is going into the mind, but also think of it this way. You are tasting things in your mind. What do I mean by that? Somebody loves the taste of, I don't know if you've ever heard of this thing that's popular in Australia, Marmite. It's made from yeast, and it has it's very, very bitter and very salty. And some people put it on crackers and they love it. And some people taste it and they're like, ugh. Or durian. Durian's another thing. I did try durian once because I've heard so much love and hate about it. I decided it wasn't for me. It's a very unusual fruit, which has a very strong sulfur taste to it and a very interesting consistency. But we are actually tasting things, we are smelling things, we are seeing things in our mind. We are perceiving things, and that's why one person tastes durian and says, oh, yummy, 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 I love this, it's the king of fruits, and another person tastes it and says, oh, ugh, gag me with a spoon, this is horrible. That's because we are actually experiencing sense perception in the mind. Now, moving on in this list, the 5 sense objects. These are called tanmatras in Sanskrit. Those are the things that we touch, things that we taste, things that we hear, things that we smell, things that we see. Desire, hatred, happiness, misery, the body, knowledge, and patience. These all together comprise the kshetra, or the field of action for the living being, along with its various transformations. So this is the philosophical concept of kshetra. As you can see, it is a big collection of things. Basically, it pretty much comprises our whole world. This is the field of activity, but it's not just the things around us, it's also the way that we interact with it, and our senses and our mind, and our the body. All of these things together make up kshetra. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. Why does the living being receive dis-ease or imbalance? Ayurveda is all about balance. Disease means that there is dis-ease, there is imbalance, right? And why? Now we're asking a philosophical question. Well, there's something called karma. Karma is reaction to our past actions. The underlying theory is that the miseries that we experience are the result of our actions on a stage or field that continuously changes based on our own actions or karma. And we undergo repeated birth and death in this universe according to our karma. So, for example, someone may, have been born in a wealthy family, and they're very beautiful, and they have a good education, and money just somehow they can make money easily, and everything is very good for them. Well, they probably have good karma. They have done good things in past lives, and they are receiving the result of things that have happened. Of course, sometimes there are people who are born in a rich family, but they are, horrible people who treat others badly, and they are probably burning up the last of some good results they had from previous life, so they can go on and receive the bad results later. So that's the way that karma works. It's usually in a different life that you get your results. So there's always repeated birth and death. This is part of the general philosophical milieu in which Ayurveda arose. But it's important to understand this. This is really the concept of karma. So sometimes people talk about karma almost as if it's a joke, like, oh, okay, well, this person went and said some bad thing to his or her coworker, and then they, tripped and hit their nose on a door. And we say, well, that was karma in action. But really, karma, although there can be karma that comes more immediately, generally it's something that we're accumulating. I like to give the example, karma is like a bank balance. So you have a bank balance where you have two balances. You have a positive balance and you have a negative balance. Your positive balance are the good deeds that you've done, the results of good deeds that you've done. The negative balance are the negative results of misdeeds. Now, at some point, they may cancel each other out, but you also keep these separate balances. And when you come into this world, you already have a balance of positive and negative, and you may already be enjoying some of that. And sometimes, again, according to this philosophy of karma mimamsa, and you'll find this in ancient texts like in the Mahabharata, there's a concept that someone may be a very good person, but they are suffering something. Maybe they were born in a poor family, or maybe they were born with a chronic illness, but they are very good-hearted people, and they only think about doing good and helping others and being very positive despite whatever suffering they undergo. That's because they are on an upward path, and they just have a little bit of negative reaction that they are just finishing up before they move on to a higher plane of existence. That is, in a nutshell, the way that the law of karma works according to these texts, which form the foundation of the thought of the times in which Ayurveda arose. Now, there are two types of karmic reactions. There are actions which result from the influence of the three gunas, and therefore they're not necessarily under our control. So this is a very important concept. When we associate ourselves with the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, they will influence us to act in particular ways. So for example, if we become very attached to something and we develop a strong attachment, that is something that's of the nature of rajogun. It's the nature of passion. And when we become frustrated, when that thing becomes taken away, it's kind of like the person who's been waiting all night to get in on a Black Friday special and get the TV set for $100, and someone else comes and snatches it and says, I was here first, and they start fighting with each other. They become angry because this is the influence of the mode of passion. The mode of passion, or rajogun, is involved when we want things and when we're driven by desire. Okay? And actions themselves are not directly the cause of the results of action. This is also important to understand because we perform different actions and then we receive the results, and we don't necessarily receive the results right away. So it's, think of it like the bank balance. So why is this relevant to Ayurveda? Because sometimes, we are just trying to even reconcile for ourselves, trying to understand, why am I seeing that someone is suffering? Why do we all suffer? We are all suffering a certain amount. We're enjoying a certain amount. Sometimes it seems that no matter what we do, we are trading one form of suffering for another, or we are trying to do something that makes us more happy, and it also adds some suffering. So this is a philosophical perspective, and this is dealt with extensively in yoga philosophy as well. Now let's talk about the concept of the threefold miseries. So I'm explaining all these things so that you have some background, and that these things, we will refer back to these things in our as we go through Ayurveda. The threefold miseries, or the three kleshas. Adhyatmic, these are miseries which arise from the mind and body, such as mental disturbance, emotional pain, grief, etc. And then there are adibautic. These are miseries which are caused by other living entities. So for example, if we're bitten by worms or insects, there's suffering that's caused by war. There may be conflict. There may be envious activities of others. These are all adibautic kleshas. And then there's adidaivik. Adidaivik klesha is suffering caused by the seasons, environmental extremes, natural disasters. Have we seen a few of those in the last year? We sure have. Right now, there's people who are suffering because of mudslides, which resulted from rains after fires in California. It's really, very tragic. All the things that have been happening: floods, tsunamis, snow, extreme cold, and extreme heat. So these are all adidaivik miseries. And you will often find in Ayurvedic texts there is a reference to these kleshas. Now, one more concept. Let's talk about the concept of virus and bacteria. This is interesting because, in Western medicine, there are actually now, I think, about 4 different agents, because there's virus, bacteria, parasites, prions, and there is a 5th one as well. I don't remember. I am not up to date on that. But there's something else besides prions. So viruses are in a unique category. They don't strictly fit the definition of a living thing. They cannot reproduce or grow. They're just little snippets of RNA in a protein shell. They require living hosts to replicate themselves. Now, we could say that viruses are adaptogenic according to Ayurveda, since they are a type of disturbance caused by an agent that changes the function of the body at a cellular level. But in industrial societies, we're exposed to various types of poison, teratogens, carcinogens, mutagens. These are produced by the actions of others, such as industrial pollution. So we can say it's antibiotic, and they can also change the function of the body in ways that create dysfunction, disease, and death. Madhava Nidan, which is also an ancient text on Ayurveda, also mentions bacterial infections. And krimi is used to refer to parasites, visible parasites such as worms and other things that might live inside our body, as well as amoebas and other smaller parasites and bacteria as well. So krimi means pathogens. Generally, so there are two types of pathogens that are mentioned in Ayurveda. There are external and internal. External pathogens arise from dirt and our external environment. They may live on the skin, and fungal infections, for example, or they may be enteric parasites. Again, amoebas, worms, roundworm, pinworm, and so forth. Internal parasites are of three types: kaphaja, raktaja, and purishaja. Kaphaja are those which are produced by mucus, the Sanskrit word for mucus being kapha. Kaphaja krimi live in mucus. They can enter through the respiratory tract. They may be produced due to ama or toxins such as respiratory tract imbalances. Raktaja krimi, they enter through and reside in the rakta, blood. An example might be pinworm, for example. They may come through insect bite, contaminated objects, or blood transfusion. Purishaja reside in the Purishavaha srotas, the large intestines. They come from contaminated water and food. Foodborne illnesses will usually be under this category. Things like E. coli, listeria, typhoid, salmonella, these are all in the category of purishaja. So what are some preventative herbs? So we mentioned that Ayurveda can also deal with prevention. We're always being exposed to pathogens. This is the, you remember, okay, you don't remember unless you're as old as me, but back in the 60s, it was all about being hygienic and keeping, killing germs and disinfecting everything, and all the products were being sold to keep your house disinfected and kill all the dirt and bacteria. And then researchers started finding, and this was something that really came out, I think, fairly recently, that children who grew up not being in an overly hygienic environment, meaning they went out and they got dirty and, they would take a bath and all that, but when they were exposed sometimes to a dirty environment, they actually grew up with a stronger immune system, because we are always being exposed to pathogens. And in Ayurveda, we recognize that it's a natural way to live, that there's some pathogens around us. Some things that help: turmeric is an amazing, has amazing properties. It helps to protect the body against pathogens. It helps to boost the immune system. Neem, another absolutely amazing herb. Aloe vera, sesame oil. Sesame is a natural antiseptic support. And some spices such as cumin and ajwain. Cooking your food thoroughly, washing food, wash your hands before cooking. Avoid eating from outside and drink filtered water. Sometimes when you go to, if a place has a good health department rating, sometimes it's not going to be as hygienic as if you cook at home. Well, so chikitsa in Ayurveda, again, one of the things that may be different, we may consider what's the karmic origin. If someone has a chronic condition, we may look at Jyotish. We may try to understand remedies that may involve connection with universal existence to help find relief. If there's a karmic issue, sometimes there are karmic remedies as well. For example, if we have something, we chronically run into issues with, let's say if I am chronically running into diseases of the feet and toenails, there may not be an obvious explanation for it. It may not be due to hygiene, but maybe there's a karmic issue involved. There may be an aspect in the 12th house in the Jyotish that we look at. And we may say, look, there's a karmic issue here. So let us, if you can, do some charity for causes that are related to this particular thing, this will pacify the karmic issue that is causing you some problem. And that can be sometimes part of the relief. But the main thing in Ayurveda, we're always trying to find the causative factor or the hetu. If the hetu is not obvious, sometimes we have to dig a little deeper. Usually the hetu is fairly obvious. Most problems are due to bad eating habits and problems with hygiene. And also problems with being regular in habits and being able to relax, get enough sleep, and drink enough water, and be able to eliminate toxins from the body. A lot of problems are resolved just by some of these very simple and basic things. Ayurveda is always focusing on causal remedies. These are benign remedies. It's benign to the extent that someone might normally make these kind of choices on their own. They might make these kind of diet and lifestyle changes. We do not have things that are really extreme that we're telling people to do. If you follow the news, somebody is going to latch on to some new thing. Someone's discovering that, okay, if we add a little bit of neem oil, then it gives your immune system a boost, and it helps prevent getting certain types of infections. And then suddenly you see there's a bunch of people who are selling, big bottles of neem oil. Take this neem oil, miracle drug, amazing, it's going to do all this. We do not make these kinds of claims in Ayurveda. We say, look, you've already got stuff in your kitchen. There are some herbs that are really good. You can take some of these things, but the main thing is to do sensible things and basic things. Don't suddenly take, half a kilo of the latest fad idea that has come out and it's just going to be amazing. That's why the FDA makes such a big ruckus over certain types of herbs. There are some herbs that are used in traditional Ayurvedic treatment that are actually not allowed by the US FDA because they assume that people are going to do these kind of idiotic things of, I'm going to go out and I'm going to suddenly start taking half a kilo of twacha or some other herb, and if I take it in that massive quantity, it may have some harmful effect. There are other things that we also can use as chikitsa in Ayurveda. We can do mantras, we can do meditation, we can do yoga, and we can do pranayama. These can be used to help achieve a mental and spiritual balance. The ahara or diet should pacify the doshas, it should pacify dhatus, it should help promote Agni, and there should also be a general vihara. There should be a daily routine and a seasonal routine that will help for the maintenance of health. In Ayurveda, we actually say, you should find a way to be happy, because if you're happy, you will be healthy. This is actually a part of vihara. We give a name to it in Ayurveda. We also use herbal formulas and panchakarma therapies. These are also things that can be done. And again, some herbal treatments are banned because of the side effects of overconsumption, because that's just what they assume. A new thing's going to come out, new herb, and suddenly snake oil salesmen are going to be pushing everybody to buy tons of it because it's amazing, miracle herb that's going to suddenly do everything for you. And you can just take this little pill, and it's only $20. Buy it right now. Get out your credit card. So there you go. So this is basically a summary of, philosophical foundations on Ayurveda and disease. If you have any questions, you can put them in here now in the chat, and I can answer them. Otherwise, we'll follow up with that on the forum. So I'm gonna just pause the recording here for a second.